So we're going to ask everybody to come on in. We're going to get started in just a second here. I know we've got all these shepherds. And so maybe one of those shepherds could go lead all those that are straying out in the fellowship hall to make their way back in. So I could sing a bring them in song, but it would drive them out. So we'll pass on that. I bet you Mike Christensen can't even hear that I'm talking about him. Nope. Nope. Well, we at least got Mike Christensen to the door, so that was an improvement. You guys from Cody, you guys have a hard time wrangling? Yeah. You act more like cowboys than shepherds with him? All right. Well, like Carlos, Everett gets an hour and 45 minutes. But he gets the first 40 by the time the introduction is here. And then we'll take a break at 12. We'll come back at 2. We'll have a little bit of time for some worship there at 2 o'clock. And then Everett will have his second session. So Everett and I have known each other since 1997. A blizzard brought us very close together. Actually, 2 blizzards in 40 below weather in Dauphin, Manitoba. I took a spiritual leadership class, and I would say it is still the most transformational class that I've taken. And it was one of the classes that I talked about when I was talking about leadership emergence. For the first time in my life, the ministry experiences, the life experiences God had put me through finally made some sense. It was something, as Everett would call it, something to exegete my life by. And so we've been off and on, got to know each other, and really just have a great friendship. So here's some things that Everett has shared about himself. He is a professor emeritus of leadership and missions at Harding School of Theology, a church consultant, is a partner in the Hope Network Ministries, and facilitator for church equipping with Missions Resource Network. Partners with international church leaders in developing emerging leaders, and he strategizes with American churches in navigating the challenges of leading churches and gaining clarity to fulfill their ministry and navigate transitions. His skills in consulting church leaders for over 30 years have developed by serving as a missionary in the Middle East, serving as an elder for 10 years, academic training and teaching spiritual leadership for 35 years, directing a Doctor of Ministry program for 10 years, and serving as Vice President Dean of a seminary for 15 years. He continues to equip and coach church leaders and missionaries by discovering the big picture and gaining clarity and moving forward. He's married to Eileen, and they have 3 married children and 10 grandchildren. Everett continues to work part-time for Mission Research Network and serve church leaders as a consultant and coach. He and Eileen plan to be in Ghana for the next 3 months, beginning February 1st, to assist a Christian college in their path to accreditation and be a resource for equipping emerging leaders. There's a lot, but I would just say, first and foremost, what I've learned with Everett, he absolutely loves God. He loves God's people, and he's a good friend. So share with us, Everett.
Okay. Hey, the sound came up right there. That's good. I need somebody to help pass these out. Thank you, guys. You did so good for Scott. I'll take the help, too. I don't like wearing masks any more than anybody else. I feel like I'm kind of, shuts everybody out. But Eileen and I are trying to avoid any possibility of testing positive the next 2 weeks before we fly to Accra, Ghana. And I guess if the worst happens, we'll just miss our flight and go 10 days later. But we'd like to avoid that. So if you've been near somebody or think you have it, you can stay away from us. That's okay. It won't offend me at all. But we're looking forward to going to Ghana for 3 months. We were in Zambia 3 months back in 2016, and then 2013 I was in Zambia again for 3 months with Harding has international programs, and they take students for a semester abroad, and the real one that's culturally involved is the one in Zambia. So imagine taking 20 sophomores to Africa for 3 months. That's a challenge. So we're going by ourselves. This ought to be fun. We'll be on campus at Heritage Christian College and helping them. So we're looking forward to that. I want to say how much I appreciate what you're doing this weekend and the leadership. So on the organizing committee was, I could just say it's probably Scott, any Scott, but Scott and
Scott
Lucason.
Dan, or not, yeah, well, Dan is coming in, it's already in.
Okay, Dan.
Patrick. Jeff Sutherland, who's not.
And Jeff, right from Billings.
And Mike Christensen.
And Mike. Okay. This is so different than what it would have been 25 years ago when I first came up here for Rendezvous. I mean, the atmosphere and the opportunities and the working together and the health of churches. I'm seeing some really healthy churches. That is something to celebrate. And I realize inside we know we got a long way to go. I mean, we all, on any given day, it's like I have a lot to be grateful for in my family, but drill a little deeper and there's some things we're frustrated about or concerned about. But this is so good. And I really pray that you'll continue to value your partnership in ministry. Because what you do together raises the whole boat. If for no other reason, your kids may end up in one of their congregations. You know what I'm talking about? And so you want these churches to all be strong and healthy. And I really appreciate how you're sharing the time and resources with each other and really focusing on church leadership. I don't think I'm stretching it to say that what you're doing this weekend has more eternal significance than just any week at camp at YVC at the lectureship and other things. All of those are extremely important. But unless we have healthy churches and healthy leaders in those churches, all of that's going to fade away. People will, why would they go to the lectureship? Why would they send their kids to YBC? Why would they do much at YBC? That's coming because of churches and the health of churches, which affects the health of those families. We also know that healthy families produce healthy churches. Can't have one without the other. And so I think this is really, really important. And I am just so pleased to see, having been here at least 25 years, and in fact, this is an incredible 7 months. I've been able to come to Montana 3 times in the last 7 months. You know, that is great, and I really appreciate all of you. I love you. Just looking around, I've been in many of your homes, from Great Falls to Helena to Bozeman to Belgrade to Billings to West Yellowstone. So Eileen and I really feel a part of the Montana family, even though I was born in New Mexico and she's born in Texas. We do feel very much a part of this family. So I hope what we share with you is helpful. Here's what I'm trying to do. I think in these 2 sessions, what you've heard so far, I think it should have persuaded you to go to the 4th generation. Would I agree? Would you agree with that? And you've been motivated to work closely as a team and partner with preachers and elders. You've been encouraged to be transparent about your struggles. And I hope all of you are at a point to say, okay, how do I drill down and do this? Give me a tool. The passing of the baton is a real interesting metaphor for what we're using in leadership. 2008 Olympics was an interesting time when the men's and women's relay team was positioned to win medals. It was clear they're going to win medals. They were some of the fastest in each of their individual records. This is the 4x100. All of them were going to do great. They didn't make it past the semifinals, and you know why. They dropped the baton. Yes. If you know much about the relay, you know that there is a baton zone, right? And there's a strategy to the whole thing. You typically save your fastest runner for the 4th position, your second for the 2nd position, 3rd and 4th, and then the last laps by the fastest, right? But when they hit this zone to pass the baton, there is a lane and there's distance, and you're boxed in. You don't have a lot of time, a lot of room to wiggle. But the one passing the baton should not have to break stride or slow down a bit, which means the one receiving has to go from 0 to 60 real quick, right? Then there's 2 ways to pass it. There's the sight or the blind. The sight is they're looking, and as they get it up, you can get it, you go. The blind is he's just looking or she's running, and they give us a signal, I'm here, and they reach back and grab it. That's good unless the other team has a similar signal. Then you got to make sure you have the right voice. So what I want to do today is in the box. We're in that baton zone of if I pass off, what are the signals that we give? What do we do? How do we get up to speed or get them up to speed so that we don't just stop everything? The worst thing you can do is you run up to the box, you get to the edge of the box, the next runner is at the other edge of the box, and you say, here, they grab it and they run. Well, by then you're a lap behind. But you know, that's how I've seen the handoff in so many churches. People who are leading won't turn loose of anything till they're in the grave. And then the other ones were saying they're waiting to receive it for years, gave up and quit. They didn't even stay at the edge of the box. They said, I have no idea how long this guy's going to live. So why, or her, either one, So why should I even try? And how do you know they want to run alongside? they make these little suggestions. You know, I'd be interested in doing that. And they get zero response. No encouragement. You know, they give these little signals that, yeah, I'd be interested in doing that, but the one runny's not ready to pass it off yet. My favorite story is some elders I was consulting out on the West Coast, actually. And in the middle of this kind of part of the discussion, there was one of them complained, said, I can't get deacons to do anything. Which I noticed deacons hadn't come up yet, so I thought I'd start that one. That's part of the box. And a lot of times we're missing it just with the deacons. Just start with that. But anyway, he was complaining about it, and I said, well, give me an example. And he said, well, I needed this, I needed that, and wouldn't do this, and so I ended up just doing it myself. I said, okay, how long have you been an elder? I've been an elder for 7-8 years. I said, what are your role? What's your role as an elder? Well, he mentioned a few of the things. I think he had education and blah, blah. And I cut the yard, cut the grass. Of course, my red flag went up. I said, you do what? He said, well, I did that as a deacon, and I just love doing it. And I just keep doing it. And I said, and this is a church, beautiful grass field. I mean, they have a pretty good sized field, so they have a shed out there. And he said, I just love driving the tractor. I said, and you've done this how many years? Told me how many years. I said, so you're telling me that there's no 25-year-old here at this church that would love to drive that tractor? He said, well, I guess there could be. I said, well, you said you don't have time to do blah, 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 most of which was shepherding. I said, well, get off the tractor and do your shepherding and let them. I said, yeah, but it's just hard to give it up, just to be honest about it. About 3 months later, I get an email and said, guess what? I gave up the tractor, and I have 2 guys that are having a lot of fun on that tractor. Passed it off. But I wonder how many guys he has lost who have come and gone, grew up at that church, and never had an opportunity to serve in a way that they would enjoy serving. Dropped it. When I was 21, I was preaching every weekend for my junior, senior year at Harding. I was preaching in churches, 2 churches, one year and one the next, outside of Searcy. And then when we moved to Memphis, we had just gotten married. I was preaching in a church about an hour drive from Memphis, and probably 7,500 members. Here I am, 21, preaching. And when you do that, I don't know if you know how it's done, but when you go there, you drive early in the morning, you go up, do class, sermon, go to someone's home for lunch and stay there for the afternoon, preach Sunday night, and then drive all the way back. That was our Sunday. Well, about the 3rd or 4th week, I went one Sunday to try out. They liked me, and so boom, there we went. They asked me at lunch, one of the families, kind of during lunch, said, which side are you going to be on? I said, what are you talking about? Which side are you going to be on? I said, I don't understand. You mean no one's told you? I said, no. Well, you know, Frog and Bird, out in the country, they gave them nicknames. So this was Frog and Bird. They were brothers. To this day, I don't remember their names. It's just Frog and Bird. And sure, you know, I'm standing there preaching, and here they're sitting in the pew right here. One Frog here, Bird here, their wife, and their 2 or 3 kids. Everybody else in the church here, but they're almost up front. I said, are you aware they haven't talked to each other in a year? I said, they haven't? What happened? Well, church went through an elder selection process, and Frog, no, I think it was Bird that made the process, and Frog didn't. Well, Frog got upset, so Bird withdrew, so he was mad at Frog for being upset. And as a result of that, they hadn't talked to each other for a year, and they didn't want their families to have anything to do with each other. So everybody, even in the community, it was a small town, everybody in the community knew, you know, these 2 families didn't have anything to do with each other. Although the cousins at church couldn't talk to each other, but when they were at school, it didn't matter. They ignored it, but they just knew at church we had to be divided. I'm 21. These guys are in their 50s, 60s, whatever it is. And I'm thinking, I don't know. So I thought, if I'm just even here a year, if I can help bridge that gap. So I started working on that. At 35, I was in East Los Angeles. And it's the first time I had an apprentice. And I was in a dying white church in the second largest Mexican city in the world, Los Angeles, East Los Angeles.
Wow.
They have been 30 members, all white, in a community that was 80% Hispanic. And they had not had elders in, 5 to 10 years, hadn't had a full-time preacher in years. I called the last preacher they had, asking, tell me more about the congregation. He said, the first thing I can tell you that the average age is deceased. I said, well, good. I could not hurt that church. I'm going all out here. So and then the one sort of ex-elder still running things and locking up and all, he did not like Hispanics. He was very prejudiced. So there wasn't a single Hispanic in this church, where the whole community was predominantly Hispanic. I found out, and this is an area where churches are dying. I know in Washington, you said 4 died? 4 churches closed this past year, someone was saying yesterday.
It was Oregon.
In Oregon, 4 congregations closed. Well, that's about the way it was in LA County. There was almost one every 5 years that were closing. I found out that one of them that closed and sold its building, put it in a trust under a group of elders, and they specified that the funds could go to support a Spanish-speaking minister. So I thought, whoa, this is great. I can now get an apprentice who speaks Spanish and kind of work with us. Well, got one. And I wish I had what I'm sharing with you right now. I had no tools to use to process the problems I was facing the first week Julio arrived. He couldn't wait to do his business card. His business card gave his name, and he said, BA, Harding University. He was going to Harding, and he put BA, Harding University, but he hadn't even finished yet. That kind of raised a question. Took him to lunch, second week, and I said, okay, I'm trying to visit some of these families, and I want you to go with me, and I'll show you, kind of thing. And he said, I'm not going to any of their houses. These are Mexicans. Come to find out, he was from another place of Latin America that thought themselves a whole lot better than Mexico. And I said, what? So after lunch, we had a knockdown drag out at the church building for about, all afternoon, because I said, how can you serve people when you're not even going to go to their homes? I mean, it was just like, I did not have any tools to work with this apprentice to deal with the things that I was having to deal with. So I think as I get into this today, you're going to see I'll come back to these stories. If you pick it up as I go through, that's fine. But I'm going to look at 3 areas of maturing that is really important in mentoring. Call it disciple making, call it maturing, becoming fully mature in Christ. It's an ongoing growth process. We know it, but we seldom address it. We had, 5 steps to conversion. If somebody would have only come up with 3 steps to growing up, wouldn't that have been great? But we never got that part. So I often find myself in churches, even with elders, who really haven't matured a lot, except maybe in knowledge. And it's hard to lead where you haven't been. So I want to look at these 3 areas in our time together today. Here's bottom line. We mentor one meaningful conversation at a time. One meaningful conversation at a time. How can you take the chit-chat that you typically have in the foyer or the chit-chat over a cup of coffee and make it a meaningful spiritual conversation that person that you're mentoring needs right then? How do you do that? What are the topics? And that's what I'm going to give. I don't care whether you're extrovert or introvert, you can do any of this. Because when I see our responsibilities as shepherding, there's no fine print, no footnote that says, unless you're introverted and you just do the busy work, let someone else do the talking. Maybe that's why in God's design that all of you have to have kids. It's really hard to have kids and do no talking. Now, there's many times they probably had to pull a conversation out of you that dad didn't want to have, but you still have to communicate. And this is true in shepherding and nurturing people in faith in Christ. So here are the three areas. Just the big picture is 3 areas of growth and maturing. One is inner life maturing. The second is life maturing. And the third is ministry maturing. So if I took the one example of Julio, his business card, what area of maturing did that reflect?
Inner life.
Inner life, because it had to do with integrity, right? But I failed because I attacked the lack of integrity rather than coaching him in how to have integrity and how important that's going to be to his ministry. Because I didn't know where to go. I just judged him like, I'm not putting up with that. You know, we got to be honest. When it came to not eating with people who were a lower class than he viewed himself, what would that have been? It's a trick question. All 3. It's harder to mentor when it's all 3. When one of them shows up, we can kind of address that. But when it's all 3, now we've got to go back and where do we start with that? And maybe this will help you as well, because it becomes a pretty complex conversation. So I'm going to start with the first one. This is weird. All my PowerPoint got changed. So I don't know, and I think whatever it is, it lost all the transitions. I don't know what happened, Scott, but it's the software you got? Okay. We're going to start with the first one, inner life maturing, which basically has to do with soul care. Talking about, Jason had a good point about just our culture and how it affects church and leading. One of the things about our culture, it has become so secular. Even in the church, we don't understand what it means to guard our souls. Soul work is very un-American. It's un-Western. We understand finance and business and sports and everything, but soul care doesn't seem to be, we don't even have a language for it sometimes. How do we guard our souls? What are we guarding when we guard our souls? And it has to do with our walk with Christ, with God, communion with God, and certainly integrity and character development. So we're going to look at this one first. There was I'm like Scott Laird. It was bigger on my screen than this one. So again, it's the software, I think it's changed this. Brady and Woodward had a book they published in 2005 called Launching a Leadership Revolution, which had some great insights that turned out to be parallel to these 3 areas I'm talking about, so I'll be kind of including that. When it came to what we're calling inner life maturing, they called it just character development. I would also say living with honor, an honorable, noble life. And the characteristics they identified, and they do have a Christian background, but it's a business book: honesty, integrity, courage, proper values based on absolute truth, faith, a humble spirit, patience with others, discipline, and self-mastery. So if you're going to have a conversation with someone who you're mentoring, would this give you 9 possible topics to choose from? And when something happens that doesn't go well, like a business card, it flags it. rather than attacking and say, we need to get rid of this guy because of blah, blah, blah. No, we need to start, this is something, a lesson that they have not learned yet. No one has really coached them in this or led them in it or influenced them in a way that they could begin to see it. Now, they may not see it after a cup of coffee. It may take a week or a month or even a year. But the fact that you helped them see the value of this is something they just didn't get growing up, whatever their context was. Inner life maturing involves daily renewal. Inner life maturing involves daily renewal. The example I give for missionaries, or from at least missions, is 9 years of my life I worshipped in Arabic. Not my mother tongue. And for those who don't understand a lot of things, in the Arabic Bible, the word for God is Allah. So I've prayed to God, sung to God, worshipped Allah all my life. How Muslims understand Allah is different than how he's presented in Scripture. But that's all the Christian Arabs of the Middle East, they've always understood Allah as God. So for someone who says Allah is not God, they just don't know Arabic. But it still wasn't my mother tongue. When we came back on furlough, we really struggled the first few Sundays as everybody's singing and worshiping, and we just got emotional. It was hard. Because this is our worship. This is our mother tongue. If our spirituality was dependent on the quality of 1 hour of worship a week, we'd be spiritually dead. So for a generation, several generations now, who think the quality of the worship service is everything to their spiritual life, I'm thinking, wow, you've boiled it down to very little now. There's not much to hang on to. If the singing has to be so-so and the preaching has to be so-so, and everything's like, you ought to go to mission field and survive for 9 years. Inner life maturing is a daily process. We daily walk with it. So spiritual influence grows in proportion to our inner life renewal. So as shepherds then, what does that mean? The more you are involved in the Word and prayer daily, the more you're going to influence others in your congregation. It's just hard to give what you don't have. So it may require you to develop some new disciplines that you didn't have. What got you here as an elder may not be what will help you continue as an elder. It's kind of like Lewis and Clark when they hit the range and the canoes wouldn't help them anymore. What got you here is not going to get you on the other side. What got you to this point, and you'll know when what got you there failed, when you become more irritable, you don't enjoy leading anymore, you complain about elders meetings, and you're a grumpy old man in the elders meeting. All that's saying is you're depleted. You're burned out. Number 2, the response to burnout is not quit, but daily renewal. When we get sick, we don't say, well, that's it. No, we go to the hospital, we go to physical therapy, and then boom, we're back at work again. So when we are burned out, we get some spiritual renewal, get back to work again. So daily renewal is going to be important. This maturing involves spiritual renewal through crisis, discipline to study and pray, and awareness of personal character development. It is measured by daily quizzes. Business card was a failed daily quiz, but it wasn't necessarily a failed exam at the end. The reason I gave daily quizzes in some classes is just, especially when I taught undergrad, is just so they'll keep them honest and do their weekly work. And if you miss something on the quiz, you'll remember that and do it well on the exam. So it isn't all over. It's just a learning process. Our spiritual influence will be determined more by our endurance of suffering than by our successes. So how, if we could talk to your neighbor, just tell them, as an elder, what's been the latest struggle you've had in the last, and how frequent has it been? When I became dean, I thought, next year's got to be better. Second year, well, that's an exception. Next year's got to be better. Well, after 15 years, no year got better. I realized that's just what deans have to do. In 10 years as a shepherd with 20 shepherds, kept thinking, boy, that was a mess. I'll be glad when next year gets here. Did you know that mess was just as bad as last year's mess? That's why we have elders, and that's why we have shepherds and leaders in churches. They really are the spiritual shock absorbers of a church. And the shock absorber takes those hits so that the rest can go smooth, so children can grow up in that church in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So families that are struggling can find hope and health and healing because you're sitting there taking the shock. You were probably like me, and maybe heard me say, I couldn't wait till our kids had kids because we knew our value would go up. When they realized how much mom and dad took the shock of so much. My son, especially in engineering, goes, boy, Dad, and what you got paid, I don't know how you made it. But there was this sense of, but they said we never felt like we went without. We kind of took the shock. That's what we do as leaders. You take those shocks. But you can't, especially if you've got air shocks, you better keep air in the shocks. And sometimes, if they're getting weak, you may have to fill it up a little more frequently. Okay, here's what we're going to do. This isn't, again, I lost transition. So I'm going to do the first question. In what ways do you need to change to be more trusted by others? So here's what I don't want you to see the other questions, because here's what I want you to do. We got 10 minutes, so talk to your neighbor. Actually, it'd be better if some of the women got in pairs and the men got in pairs. And I would say, since you got 10 minutes, just stand. Just find a talking partner and stand. And here's what I want you to come up with. How can we have a conversation with someone that you now have in mind you need to mentor on inner life maturing? I'm assuming you know the congregation well enough. You can come up with a name of someone who needs inner life maturing. Character issues, integrity issues, whatever it is. Think of that person. What question would you ask them to shift from chit-chat about the snow and the weather to a spiritual kind of processing that would address that particular area of inner life maturing? Are you with me? Think you can do that? It's because I'm going to coach you to start doing that when you get home. How can you shift into a conversation that's constructive? Again, this is just an example. In what ways do you need to change to be more trusted by others? This could come from a person that's been in the church for 20 years. Why don't they trust me? Why did my name not come up to be an elder? Well, what question would you ask to have a deeper conversation that might help turn that around, rather than saying, he's hopeless, when he may be good in the other areas of life maturing and have skills, ministry maturing, but there's an inner life maturing issue. What question would you ask that particular person that you have in mind? Same thing with ladies. There's bound to be some women who have struggled with things that it may be so messy you just avoid them. Even cross the street when they come. Go down the other row at church when they're down this one, or whatever it is. But think about if a specific inner life maturing character issue, how could you lead to a deeper level of meaningful conversation that could mentor them in their walk with God? So take 10 minutes and we'll just find somebody to talk to, and we'll leave. Our lunch break will be at 12:05. Does that sound okay? Is this too participatory for some of us? Let's see what this does. You're going to do it 2 more times this afternoon, so I'd say get good at it now.